Oh, right. Well, probably most people are going to miss this. I'm actually doing this more just so folks can kind of watch it after the fact. I am very blessed to be very abundant. I have a lot going on. In fact, prayers up for me. I have a very important meeting today that's a really big opportunity to be a part of a project that is going to do really good work. It's not the one that I've talked about often, but it's really, really good. So prayers up for that. Just real quick, some house cleaning. I haven't set it up yet. I've just been too busy, but I'm going to have an angelic magic class Thursday of the third Thursday of 2024. I'll have the first angelic magic class. And then I have one last astrology reading available this year before 2024. So without further ado, I want to talk about this recent mega spike in gold that just happened yesterday. If you pull up the gold chart, you'll see that there was just this incredible spike upwards. Gold hit an all-time high, and then it was very quickly hammered down. When gold spikes like that, it's because either something has broken in the financial system or something major has happened geopolitically that was very unexpected. I'm not sure which of those two happened. I suspect it's something financial because I didn't see anything. I just have been very busy recently. I haven't had time to really dig deep, but I don't see a geopolitical unexpected event that would trigger such a thing. It could be insiders preparing for some major event coming and buying up gold. And then the central banks and the cartel got together and knocked the price of gold back down. But what I suspect is actually something behind the scenes hit and broke financially. And if that's the case, then that will probably come out, I would imagine, in the next week or two, tops. They might try and push it back to, say, the day after Christmas or around the Christmas holiday, and then, do a Friday night news dump, something like that. But to see gold hit an all-time high, especially with a mega spike the way it happened on Sunday, says that something very massive happened behind the scenes. Again, either financial or something geopolitical. If it's something geopolitical, some sort of backroom deal, like say maybe a truce in Ukraine, or I don't know what it would be, must have been walked back from, or some kind of threat was made that then caused insiders to buy to cause gold to spike like that. So keep an eye out on the financial sector and also keep an eye out for geopolitical events. And again, whatever caused that spike is probably going to come to the fore in the next couple of weeks. It could also be just that there was a leak around that the Fed is, despite saying they're going to raise interest rates, that they're going to capitulate and start printing money en masse, which has huge implications. Then the other thing I want to talk about is a very interesting meeting that happened last week, or press conference rather. So there was a press conference last week about, I hate this term UAPs. It's just like why change from unidentified flying object to unidentified aerial phenomenon? The only like reasonable justification for that is that they have decided that they need to include interdimensional things, and so therefore it's not a physical phenomenon. That's really the only like reasonable categorization reason to change from UFO to UAP. But it's pretty clear to me that since UAP seems to be emanating from Langley and the CIA, that it's very much narrative driven. And I know whenever anyone talks about UAP, it's always threat, national security, and with the hint that we need more money, and also that this stuff should be folded in deeper into the intelligence community. Although this conference was very interesting, and it had a woman I've never seen before and a couple of other figures that I'm just not really familiar with. I mean, House of Representatives is vast, but this woman looked to me like she's kind of a, AOC of the right, by which I mean she's incredibly gorgeous. And I'm not saying that an incredibly gorgeous young woman couldn't be like some kind of political savant. It's possible. But to me, she screams front woman for an agenda because she's so extremely attractive. And I didn't catch what her name was, and I'm not going to take the time right now to look it up. But if you go to The Hill, they covered this. They actually had the whole meeting, although weirdly, like it has very poor audio quality when they released the full meeting. But and I haven't actually even watched the full thing, but I guess they say crazy stuff like they have extraterrestrial vehicles, extraterrestrial technology, all this kind of stuff. But what really, really, really caught my eye from, probably most of the people viewing right now are not subscribers just because I just put this up impromptu, but for people who are not subscribers, I talk a lot on this channel about a split between the elites, between the group that I call the Luciferians, which are a more libertarian, high technology. They want to create a technocracy, false light paradigm being set up to be kind of seeming rescuers or white knights who will save society from the evils of the woke monstrosity that's attempting to sweep aside history and put everyone in pods and give everyone bugs to eat and brain chips, all that insanity coming out of Davos. And then there's the Malachians, which are that Davos set, which are like very authoritarian. They don't like free discourse of information. They don't like competition. They're monopolists rather than capitalists, whereas the Luciferian side is much more libertarian. And so from that perspective, and I urge you to go back and look at my Luciferians, Shadow Wars, the Luciferians versus the Malachians, and I think that you'll find that it's a fairly unique view on what's happening in the world right now that talks about this pretty significant schism among the elites, which is both in terms of consciousness, but also in terms of the deity they worship. The elites that I call Malachians worship Moloch, or the lower aspect of Saturn. And the other elites, the technocrat elites that you often see in the libertarian side of politics, they worship and or have the consciousness that's what I call Luciferian consciousness. There, of course, is a third group, which is the group that I'm aligned with, and probably most people watching, which is the Most High, and that's much, desiring a much more harmonious, loving community here on Earth, rather than these two different kind of forms of control and top-down domination of two different, very different kinds. So Luciferians are much more, I don't want to say egalitarian, that would be more Most High, but they're at least libertarian. They allow for a meritocracy rather than everything is nepotism, everything is about top-down control. So someone just said, "Hail Lucifer" in the comments, which is kind of funny. Yeah, I mean, I have no beef with Luciferians. I find them to be vastly more reasonable. I also recognize they're extremely ruthless and dangerous, but they're not just the pure pitch blackness of the Malachians. So the person who caught my eye on that UFO conference was Matt Gaetz from Florida. Matt Gaetz just keeps popping up at these pivotal moments, and he keeps having like an outsized influence on events. The most obvious example of this is that he was instrumental in getting the previous Speaker of the House out. I think McCarthy was his name, and then getting the new Speaker of the House in. He also was a big figure in assisting Trump in various things. He talked a lot about J6 in the election and continues to. And he just keeps popping up at all these pivots in this shadow war between the Malachians and the Luciferians. And for him to pop up around the UFO UAP issue is just a bit stunning. And it makes me think that the UFO UAP thing, which I've long thought was really going to catch fire in 2024, it's all of a sudden being resurrected in the last few weeks after a lot of nothing since around June or July. All of a sudden, it's really picking up pace. There's starting to be press conferences. There's starting to be stuff go on in Congress. There's starting to be more and more buzz in the mainstream media again. And so it looks to me like the UAP, UFO, faked invasion thing is on deck potentially for 2024. They at least want to have that up their sleeve. And again, remember, from this Luciferian Malachian Shadow Wars point of view, that would be a watershed moment that would allow the Luciferians to take over from the Malachians, because the Malachians control, they're the old guard. They're who has ran the planet for the past 6,000 years, the Kali Yugas. And they're getting very long in the tooth, and their time is very nearly done. Check out my interview with Bibudev Misra, where we discuss how the Kali Yuga ends based on his scholarship in 2025. I believe he's correct. I looked for like a decade, and when I found his work, I was like, holy shit, this guy's figured it out. He's cracked the code. And with the end of the Kali Yuga, that means the end of Moloch's power. Moloch's reign is over, and the Luciferians then would be taking over in the Dwapara and Treta Yugas, the Bronze and Silver Ages, as we move in consciousness upwards towards the Golden Age, where once again the Most High will rule, much as during the pristine part of Atlantis, the Golden Ages, the Most High ruled, but at the end of the Golden Age, at the end of Atlantis, corruption had begun to emerge, which of course makes sense as consciousness is lowering, as you're now moving out of the Sat Yugas, the Golden Age, into the Treta Yuga, the Silver Age. That was a descent in consciousness. We are now ascending in consciousness. And so at the very end of Atlantis, it went from being this beautiful, harmonious, stable society to they began to make war on other peoples. They began to do all kinds of lower consciousness type things, and misuse technology in particular is one of the big hallmarks of the fall of Atlantis. So, so Matt Gaetz appearing shows me that the UAP UFO faked invasion is probably on deck, and that if that happens, what that would mean is that the Luciferians are going to dupe the Malachians, who mistakenly think that the Luciferians are part of them. Very interesting comment that I'll respond to here in a minute from Chris Morpho. I'm just doing a very short beginning, and then I'm going to do about 20 to 30 minutes of Q&A. I don't even know how much there'll be. I just wanted to do something short to get some content out before Thursday and Friday when I'll have a much longer live stream. They will basically, the Luciferians, they trick both people who are Most High aligned and Malachians because they have this Luciferian confusion around them. Malachians think that the Luciferians are a kind of weird strain of Malachians who just are weirdly like intelligent and kind of doing their own thing, but very, very useful because they acted as the consigliere to the Mafia Don of the Malachians. And so therefore they were the smart ones that did all the intelligent planning. They've withdrawn their support from the Malachians since 2020, and they're starting to do their own thing. So the Malachians don't understand that the Luciferians aren't on their side. Just like the Most High people will look at the Luciferians and mistake them for Malachians. That's one of the big mistakes people make in the truth movement, is that they see this homogenous, monolithic, evil elite. And they don't understand that there is a significant and important difference. While it's two different strains of, you can call it evil if you want, right? Just like not moving towards the true light of the Most High, but instead being either stuck in the pitch blackness of Malachianism or moving into the false light, false savior paradigm of the Luciferians, who are, the Malachians are very, in fact, I'll just put up a chart because I imagine there's probably a lot of people who aren't familiar with the work on this channel. And this chart is very useful in helping people kind of understand the core of this concept of the Luciferians versus the Malachians. So I'm just going to find this chart real quick. Hopefully it won't take me too long. And then there we go. And then I'm going to put it up so that way you can go. You will see that the core trait then is the core trait of the Malachians is self-hatred. Here we go, which they project outward onto others. And so they do things like Epstein-style harm of children, slavery, physical torture, dead materialism, hive mind, chaotic duality, you're either with me or you're against me, parasitism, might makes right, material stagnation for humanity. What confuses a lot of people who aren't familiar with this concept is at the lower vibration of Luciferianism, it's a crossover here with the Malachians. You have conquest, hierarchy, ruthlessness, competition, desire for power is something the Luciferians have in common. But the core trait of the Luciferians is narcissism. And have you noticed any narcissism rising in society in the past 20 years, sort of replacing self-hatred and sort of like self-suppression, right? Of like the 50s, like suppressing everything. Right, it's been replaced with this narcissism. Now, the Malachians have been coming out and like trying to push pedo in the public sphere and like trans and all this like insanity, in part because this always apparently happens according to the angels at the end of the yugas. Moloch, or at the end of the Kali yugas, Moloch knows that his time is limited, and so he tries to roll out the Moloch statues in public. He tries to normalize pedophilia. Tries to do all this stuff to maintain power. But the thing is, Moloch only works well when he's in the shadows and dominating from the shadows. The Luciferians are able to be out in public and be sophisticated and tricky and lie, but the Malachians can't. So the Malachians always use Luciferians as frontmen. And so once Luciferians withdraw their support and their intelligence, because the Luciferians are incredibly cerebral, they're incredibly brilliant, high IQ, but they lack wisdom. So you can see that the way the Luciferians separate themselves from Malachians and Most High is they have enlightened self-interest, rule of law over man, meritocracy, and they honor contracts and believe in rule of law. Then the highest vibration, the highest octave of the Luciferians is cooperation and advancements in arts and sciences. They believe in cooperation, right? Meritocratic, honoring of contracts, but cooperation. They believe in the spiritualization of humanity. They believe in liberty and free will and improved material well-being of humanity. And that's where it crosses over with those who are aligned with the Most High, whose core trait is self-love, true self-love that leads inevitably to love thy neighbor as thyself. And you can see at the very, very top here, innocence is protected as opposed to the Epstein-style harm of children, right? You can see how that there's a reflection and real, mirror between the Most High vibration and the Malachian vibration. So when I say Luciferian and Malachian, most of them don't actively worship Moloch or Lucifer, although some of them do. For example, I'm pretty sure that Elon Musk is a active Luciferian, meaning he worships Lucifer. His girlfriend and baby mama Grimes, his longtime partner Grimes, has openly admitted that she channeled Lucifer to make her music, which is pretty amazing. So you can see up here, all is one, all is God, non-hierarchical union, perfect trust, symbiosis, harmonious duality, divine masculine, divine feminine, individuated telepathy, and of course, innocence is protected. So that's sort of the distillation, and I go into that in much greater detail in the Shadow Wars, Luciferians versus Malachians, which this is sort of an ongoing commentary. That's what this live stream is, and so I really recommend it. I think it'll really open your eyes about the schism that's there amongst the power elite and how important that is, because we are moving into an era which will be dominated by this Luciferian consciousness, high technology, right? Like psychic gifts and spirituality, right? The entire New Age movement is a Luciferian movement. If you really drill down into the New Age and you learn ancient esoteric information, you'll find out that almost the entirety of the New Age is repackaging and a watering down and key manipulations around ancient esoteric principles that actually are passed down by and large from the Atlantean era, when we were at a much higher state of consciousness. And so all the stuff about UFOs and aliens and there's just lots of stuff that's in that milieu. Some of it is accurate, right? Because the best lies always have grains of truth. But everything in the New Age movement, basically everything starting with the creation of the hippie movement in the 60s by the CIA, right, who released LSD, right? They were using LSD for mind control in the 50s with like prostitutes and Johns. The prostitute would dose a John and then they would observe it, right? There's a great movie on Netflix called Wormwood that shows this process. They use it to also blackmail politicians, all kinds of stuff. And it was part of the MK Ultra mind control program. That whole milieu that led to the hippie movement and the counterculture was laying the groundwork for actually what's happening now. And the Luciferians tricked the Malachians into doing it because they said, we're going to completely destroy Christianity, right? Yeah, Randy Neon just said Tavistock and Rancourt. Absolutely correct. And again, keep in mind that all these power elite institutions are a mix of Luciferian and Malachian. There's some power elite institutions. I would argue that Tavistock is primarily Malachian in nature, but of course there's going to be Luciferians in there who are doing the really brilliant work around it. And mind you, subtle forms of mind control are right up the alley of the Luciferians. More hardcore, like torture-based mind control, right? The creation of mind control assassins in particular, that's much more in the Malachian level of consciousness. The Luciferians, as a general rule, prefer a subtle touch. They're very light touch. And so two examples of two very well-known organizations that I perceive as primarily Luciferian and Malachian respectively is the NSA appears to be a primarily Luciferian organization, but of course it'll have Malachians and a much smaller amount of Most High people. As a general rule, Most High people aren't attracted to intelligence agencies and that sort of thing, or the military. So they're generally not found in that milieu, but some amount are. The CIA is very Malachian in nature. It has some amount of Luciferians, but it's very Malachian in nature. And so you can see the difference between those two. The NSA is incredibly subtle. Most people didn't even know it existed, even though the NSA is actually, its genesis is pre-World War II code breaking. And so it predates the OSS, the Office of Special Services, which then they brought over the Nazi paperclip scientists, and the OSS plus the Nazi paperclip scientists became the CIA, right? So the NSA was older than the CIA, and yet people didn't even know it existed really until the 1990s. And then there was a number of movies that came out, and it kind of entered into the popular lore around that time. Yeah, NRO is also not well known. And again, NRO is space. Anything that has to do with space is almost inevitably chock full of the Luciferian impulse. And again, Luciferian impulse does have that lower vibration that I pointed out that is very nasty and very similar in a lot of ways to, it's part of that crossover in that Venn diagram. I'll just throw that up again real quick for people who are just joining. And again, I go into all this in much greater depth, and I highly recommend it if this is intriguing to you. Oops, that's the wrong one. Let's see. There we go. I, again, recommend that people review the Shadow Wars Luciferians versus Malachians. But you can see there's this significant section between the purple and the blue where you got conquest, hierarchy, competition, ruthless, and desire for power. There is like significant, and that's just a nutshell. There's more to it. There is significant crossover between the two groups, and that's part of why people mistake it, and especially people who are newly awakened, like they've just mostly since 2020. For a lot of people, 2020 was a horror show, right? 2020, 2021 was really horrifying to them. For me, I happened to have a spiritual awakening in late 2000, early 2001, including a vision about 9/11, and then 9/11 was my real the stolen election 2000. Oh, shoot. I hope that doesn't trigger the algorithm. Well, that one's okay because it's the naughty Republicans. But the 2000 election, that really did help activate me. But it was really it was really 9/11 that really, really woke me up politically and caused me to do a really big deep dive and start to learn about all of this stuff. And so I learned in late 2001, I also have something called claircognizance, which is that sometimes when I'm presented with information, I hear this ring of truth. And when I do, I always know it's right. And it has about a 95 to 98% accuracy for me. And so when I hear something, even if it's mind-boggling, like black magicians rule the planet, then I can know that that is real, even though I couldn't really grok it until much, much later. And so figuring that out back in 2001 was incredibly, thank you, Devin. I'll put that one up because that's particularly nice. It was incredibly alienating to figure this all out. I learned about the Bush family and the Nazis with like the Union Banking Corporation, Prescott Bush, and Averell Bunny Harriman of the Harriman Railroad fortune, and how they helped bankroll the Nazis through Fritz Thyssen, all this kind of stuff. I learned really heavy stuff in 2001, 2002 that was incredibly alienating. I mean, think about probably a lot of people watching this right now. Most folks have awoken in the past 3 years. Not everybody. There's some people who knew about this stuff back in the 60s and 70s, way before me, before I was even born. So, it's not like I'm the most knowledgeable person or the first person awake. And I'm not trying to say that. I'm just trying to point out that you might be surprised to discover that I found the events of 2020, 2023 to be frightening. Sure, 2020, 2021 to be very frightening. But what was hugely relieving for me is finally, people were aware of these things that I had been aware of for like 20 years, which was very alienating at the time. Everybody thought, you think it's crazy to talk about this stuff now to family. Imagine doing it circa 2001, 2002, right? I'll tell you, it did not go over well. And some of my family was even saying I should be committed. It was not a good time at all. And I eventually just learned I couldn't talk about it to anyone. So when I saw this mass awakening that's been happening because of the events of 2020, 2021, I actually find it to be incredibly heartening. And in fact, you should too, because the rate of awakening to the political realities and a usually correlated spiritual awakening, which is actually far more important, has been really happening in a major, major way. And so do take heart in that. Things are on the cusp of changing. So I'm just going to go through and see if there's any comments here, and I'm going to shift to the Q&A section. So if you have any questions about anything I said or anything else, feel free to throw them up there. I answer pretty much all respectful questions. I do need to go in about 20 minutes. It's just a short one. Wow, that is fascinating. Thank you, Chris, for that comment. Apparently, Matt Gaetz' family home was used as Jim Carrey's house in The Truman Show. Strange coincidence. The Truman Show is a very interesting revelation of the method, and also one thing I do not like, and I'm not going to go into too much, but it's one of the things that flat earthers point to about how we live under a dome, just like that movie. The revelation of the method part of Truman Show is how much of everything has been faked and controlled by the media, and that in many ways people's reality is constructed by the media. That's, in my estimation, that is what the point of the Truman Show was in terms of the revelation of the method. So then Randy Neon had some great comments. He said Tavistock Institute and Rand Corp. By the way, speaking of flat earth, Tavistock put that out as a negative psyops, just like viruses aren't real. Those are both psyops to discredit and divide the truth movement. And I've noticed that both of those are on an extreme rampage in the past couple of weeks in order to basically divide the truth movement. And also, I have concerns that they're going to once again release a bioweapon, attack the public with it. And so isn't it nice when you say, imagine you could say, being mugged, you're a mugger, and you tell everyone, oh, muggings never happen. Muggings never happen. That's just nonsense. And you've just mugged a bunch of people. That would be great, right? If the majority of the public thought that muggings didn't happen and you were going around mugging people, that would be really handy for you. They would give you not just plausible deniability, you would make the other people look crazy. So saying viruses don't harm people, right, when you're using bioweapon attacks on people is an incredibly useful psyops. And I call that the high IQ flat earth. So let's see here. NRO is also not well known. That's a National Reconnaissance Organization. Yep, great. Koyos Ronan, hey, buddy, it's nice to see you. Much love to you too, brother. Yeah, I like Porsche too. Not sure what that comment is about, but I do like Porsches. They're cool, especially a 959. Yay, Livestream. Yeah, thank you again, Devin. Very kind comments. Yes, thank you, Ian, for taking the time to get this info to us, and thank you for answering my question from the other evening. God bless you. Oh, thank you, TJ. Yep, I try and answer all respectful questions. The cornerstone of the Pentagon was also laid on 9/11, the war offices. That's interesting. If you want to expand on that, the 51 project, I would love to hear what you're talking about. Are you saying like back in the 50s or 60s that cornerstone was laid, or in their since they've been fixing the damage from whatever it was that was not a 747 that hit the Pentagon that day? And I just want to point out that's an example of a false conspiracy, right? To discredit people. They say, oh, as hologram planes hit the towers. So that way, when you say, oh, there was no plane at the Pentagon, people will say, yeah, and there were hologram planes at the two towers. And then someone who, like friends of mine who were in New York and felt the rush of air of the planes coming over at sea level, which, by the way, no pilot could do, remote control probably used, almost certainly, drone planes, whatever it was, right? But what I'm certain of is a physical object hit the World Trade Centers. I just know too many people who were in Manhattan that day, right? But if you put out there that there was no plane on the Pentagon, people will confuse that with there was no planes at the towers, right? And there was no plane at the Pentagon, but there were planes at the towers. Do you see how they use that to muddy the waters? They use false conspiracy theories to muddy the waters. That's what they do. So that comment is great for bringing that up. Randy Neon, I tried to mention the committee of 300 to my family. Yeah, it's pretty deep because now you're talking about the real rulers, which is the Venetian Black Nobility, which I try not to talk about too much anymore, but I do have prior videos on that on this channel. I just try not to go into any of the actual families today in particular. Media, Medea equals Greek goddess. That's correct. Great point. And I don't think, you can always look at etymology like that. And words that have multiple layers of meaning. See, that's another mistake people make, is that people want things to be one thing or the other when many times they're many, many, many things. The Bible, for example, the Bible is a historical book. It's astrotheology. It has encoded angelic magic spells. I'm a practicing angelic magic magician, an angelic magician. And the book of Psalms are almost all angelic calls that are heavily encoded. And so it reads to a person like, the shade from the cedar trees up on the snowy mountain touched down upon the earth. And they go, oh, that's okay. Not knowing that it's also that is a part of an invocation to summon the angels. So the Bible is many things. There's metaphors, there's similes, there's literal truths, there's historical truth, right? And it's also been heavily edited and manipulated for mind control purposes. But there's also the beautiful teachings of the Most High that come through Yeshua, Jesus. And, I'm not Christian, as I say all the time on this channel, but I do believe with certainty that surrendering to Jesus is one of the ways that we can get into perfect alignment with the Most High. Like, I think the teachings of Yeshua are beautiful. There are some edits in there that do not have the same resonant high vibration that I do not believe Jesus said. For example, you're either with me or against me. Some of the other stuff, the deification of him after his life, I don't think is accurate. But seeing Jesus as the Savior and surrendering to Jesus, that is an absolutely viable way. But the mistake, in my estimation, that Christians make is believing it is the only way. That's actually dogma and mind control stuff, in my opinion. But I do believe it's a beautiful series of teachings. But what I want to point out is that this word media, and being the same as Medea, the Greek goddess of sorcery and illusion, is right on the money, because it's meaning multiple things at once, layers of meaning. That's one of the things that's been lost over the years, is that chaotic duality I mentioned of the Malachians. One of the things it does is it says it's either this or it's that. You're either with me or you're against me, right? Notice that thing that I said that I do not agree Jesus said, you're either with me or against me, right? There's no, in my estimation, there's not a chance that he said that, because that's Malachian. It doesn't, it's authoritarian rather than being expansive and loving and opening yourself up and recognizing that everything is God's creation, right? Which doesn't mean that we can't have firm boundaries and get rid of horrible things and have unacceptable things in culture that we don't allow, right? It just means that you have that forgiving compassion that turn the other cheek. You can just really tell anything that's like uplifting and makes you happy and more peaceful and more welcoming to your neighbor, then you can know he said it, right? Love thy neighbor as thyself. That's the core teaching that Yeshua brought to us. Anything that makes you fearful, that's probably something added after the fact that is falsehood. So let's see here. David L., what do you make of the Moloch versus Lucifer, and who's behind the third temple Antichrist? That is it's ultra deep question that there's really no quick way to answer that. Both is like the most distilled I can say. They both want it. They both need it to happen for different reasons. The Malachians want to bring in the avatar of the lower aspect of Saturn and have him assume the throne and be this despotic ruler with the iron, rod, right? And the Luciferians want the Antichrist to mislead people. It's not quite the same. They have similar goals, but very different. The Malachians want to destroy God. The Luciferians want to lead you away from God and put yourself and Lucifer at the center. It sounds the same, but it's distinctly different. The Malachians want to destroy nature. They want to just bring death. They want total submission or total annihilation. That's all that Moloch offers. When he holds out the two hands in the Moloch statues, it's total submission to the fear that passes understanding, where you would sacrifice your children to that entity, that being, or he offers total annihilation, right? Like total slavery or total annihilation. That's it. Lucifer wants you to think that you're going along with him by your own free will, to show that free will was a mistake. So it's nuanced, but this is such a deep question, David. It's such a deep question that it would really require an entire show to answer, and I need to do a lot more research. But we'll see what happens. Like whenever this nightmare in Gaza ends, however it ends, like I do think that in the very near term future, they're going to try to demolish the Al-Aqsa Mosque there on the Dome of the Rock and replace it with the third temple. I'm very concerned about that. That would almost certainly set off a conflagration in the Middle East. I'm just not sure how they could even build it almost until that war in the Middle East was done and that there was victory. Like, I'm just not even sure how it can happen. I don't know if there can be restraint on the part of the nations of Islam if they were to, blow up the third holiest site in Islam. I just can't imagine. They're not like Christians who were like Malakians, possibly using Islamic frontmen or whoever it was. There's a video of it lighting Notre Dame on fire and some of the other churches on fire in France back when that was happening. Christians will just, take it. And also Europe's not really Christian anymore. It's primarily atheist. But Islam is not that way. And if you destroy the third holiest site in Islam after Mecca and Medina, that's not going to possibly go well. So I don't know where that could go. Pentagon Cornerstone Ceremony, September 11th, 1941. Thank you, Project 51. I've never heard of that before. How fascinating, how very, very, very interesting. I didn't realize that the Pentagon construction began in 1941. I thought it began more like in 45 or even 47. So that's new information for me, and thank you for sharing that. See, I learn new stuff all the time, and I try to maintain humility despite the fact that I have put a lot of thousands of hours of time and effort into research. I don't know anything, and I'm constantly pleased with how educated my viewers are and how they can bring new information to me all the time, and that we can work together as a community to help develop a map of what's going on in reality right now during this critical time period. So thank you for that, 51 Project. Why was resurrection taken out of the Bible? Do you mean reincarnation, perhaps? And the answer for that is mind control. They want to have you fearing hell and thinking you go to heaven and it's a forever state and that you're one and done. So YOLO, right? You only live once, and that if you think that if you just obey the church, then you will go to heaven forever, then that makes for very pliable, useful mind control military and tax harvesting slaves, right? Because Constantine supposedly saw that a Christian unit of his warriors fought harder than anyone else, and he found out it was because they believed, and this was a much purer form of Christianity, to be fair, but it already had issues with it because the Babylonian sorcerers who run the world, they successfully were right there at the beginning with all three Abrahamic faiths. I mean, I believe that they had a massive hand in the creation of what we call Judaism with the Babylonian Talmud and other stuff that came directly out of Babylon. That doesn't mean there's not beautiful teachings in Kabbalah or whatever, or beautiful teachings in Judaism. There certainly are in the Torah, Psalms, Song of Songs, some other stuff. Torah I like quite a lot. Babylonian Talmud is just an absolutely vile document. I don't care what anyone says. That's not anti-Semitic. Just read it, and you can't come to any other conclusion, I don't think. Islam, apparently originally, it sounds like maybe Muhammad came from Petra in Jordan. And the first 100 years of mosques are all oriented towards Petra rather than modern Mecca, right? And modern Mecca has the Kaaba stone and the black cube building around it, which is a hallmark of the lower aspect of Saturn, right? And then Constantine, 100% for sure, and under this sign I shall conquer. Constantine definitely wanted to use the Christians based on their belief in heaven and how hard they fought. He wanted to use them to build up his army. And so he, had the Council of Nicaea, or it happened not long after Constantine, or maybe it was before Constantine. I forget exactly the order, but regardless, by the time no later than the Council of Nicaea, which was a few hundred years after Yeshua, Jesus, there were significant edits made to the Bible to where they, at a bare minimum, took out huge sections of the Bible. And I'm of the opinion that they added and deleted stuff to what was put in, and then went out of their way to annihilate any records to the contrary. So in all three cases, the Abrahamic religions, the Malachians got in there pretty early. And one of the reasons I've heard why they took reincarnation, which is, I believe, what your actual question is here. Oh, you clarified that, yes, it is because if you reincarnate, that makes you less amenable to control, because then you know that you're not one and done, and therefore you don't have to fear death intensely. And then it makes you more amenable to control, either threats Or if you think there's no consequences, right? Atheists are in particular, dead materialist atheists are particularly susceptible to mind control because they fear death because it's just a game over screen when you die. And they also think that perhaps they can just do whatever they can get away with. Some atheists are incredibly ethical, but a lot of atheists, if you look, the people who are really going for the Malachian agenda, I don't want to say the overwhelming majority of them are atheists, but I would say the overwhelming majority of atheists are in line with the Malachian hive mind. And it's really tragic because I know some people who are really good that have fallen for all of this, and it's because when you can threaten people with death and you can bribe them, which is much easier with atheists and dead materialists, then it allows them to be much easier to control. Likewise, if you think you only live once, again, that threat of death is very powerful. And if you say, oh, well, if you do what the leadership of the church, which I control, tells you to do, then you'll go to heaven. It can get good people to commit atrocities. And so that's what was taken out. Although they didn't successfully delete all the references. They asked Jesus, well, if you're the Messiah, how did you, Isaiah was supposed to return first. And he says, yes, you know him as John the Baptist. So that's one of they forgot to cut that out. And so that shows that resurrection or reincarnation is mentioned in the Bible. And real quick, he said, yes, reincarnation, thanks. So did you find the most nihilistic atheist to be Malachian? Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, without question. That's why I put dead materialism as one of the core traits of Malachianism. The Luciferians are very spiritual, actually. They're very spiritual and they believe in a higher power, but they also want to channel spirituality essentially for selfish ends, right? They want to use the psychic and other spiritual abilities that humans have for selfish ends, right? Putting yourself at the center rather than God, right? So let's see, what did Randy say here? And I do got to go in 8 minutes, folks. I have a very important meeting that please, if you could prayers up that it will go well. I'd really appreciate that. It's very important and could allow me to do be a part of something really great and allow me to do more helpful things in the world. What do you make of the Dome of the Rock being located 666 nautical miles from the Kaaba and Mecca? Well, I don't know when it was created. I do think that 666 is a little overplayed. The oldest fragment we have shows that actually the correct number there should be 616, interestingly enough. So nonetheless, it has become a symbol over time of Moloch, Satan, whatever you want to call it. So interesting. It wouldn't surprise me if that was intentional, much like moving the orientation of the mosque from Petra in Jordan, where it seems there's a good chance that the Prophet Muhammad was born. And hat tip to Robert Seffer, one of the greatest researchers out there, who pointed this out. I'd never heard that before. And he made an incredibly compelling argument that actually Mecca should be in Petra in Jordan, and that it was moved, and that Petra in Jordan matches the Quran's descriptions. Petra at that time was a thriving trade center, whereas Mecca was kind of nothing at the time. And so it makes more sense that Muhammad was born in Petra rather than Mecca or Medina. So very, very interesting stuff. It could be that that's intentionally put in there by the Malachians for sure. I don't know. And I don't know. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying I don't know whether that is a correct measurement. It's also interesting nautical miles, right? Because you get into that whole, it's the Phoenician sea kings, out of Tyre, right, that are, then colonized Carthage and seem to have gone over to the Americas and brought human sacrifice to the Mayans and Aztecs, and that admiralty law and what's that stuff called for seafaring law? God, I can't think of the word. I know you guys all know what I'm talking about. But that law seems to supersede other laws, the law of the sea. Why can I not think of what it's called? It's driving me bonkers. But that law has primacy over all other laws, in that it seems, I read this book a long time ago called Poker Without Cards. It's an ebook, and I just started to read it, and it actually gave me a lot of threads that helped me to form my current view of the world. And in that, they said that they believe that sea kings had taken over because they had a greater reach, and they could move goods and make more money much faster than people who are landlocked. Naval power is certainly key. I mean, if you look at the British, that's how they were able to dominate from that little tiny island. That and the Venetian bankroll that the black nobility brought up after the War of the League of Cambrai, that certainly helped. Also, John Dee, the famous magician and astrologer who advised Queen Elizabeth, the combination of John Dee's incredible genius and the Venetian bankroll and the British leaning into naval power is why Britain ruled the world for so long. And so this idea that naval power has been primary for a lot longer than we think makes a lot of sense to me. So it's interesting, nautical miles and it's not at maritime law. Finally, thank you. It's driving me bonkers. Maritime law and admiralty law, which are both very related. The law of the sea. And of course, the law of the sea is 2/3 of the Earth's surface of the Earth is dominated by maritime law. And there's a lot of evidence that the land is dominated by maritime law. I'm not 100% on this gold fringe on the flag thing, but it does seem to have some amount of legs. And the whole that there's the Vatican Sea, the sea there, the Holy See. Is like where the stock exchange that has everyone's straw man, that seems to have legs as well. Black's Law Dictionary, which I have on the shelf over there. It's just a very dry read, and there's lots of nonsense that's irrelevant. And then the occasional gems like the word monster is really fascinating, and job and some of these other things, the way it's defined. They have an entirely different language. And so the legal system is one way that you get much closer to the whole understanding of the Babylonian system is what really runs things still to this day, but it's about to be overthrown. All right, good old Tom. Yeah, enjoyed this, but got to bounce at 6:30. I'll finish up later. You probably are gone already. Tom is a great font of information about Revelation, the Method, and hidden meanings. And he's a film critic and does great reviews. Had him on my channel a while ago to talk about Revelation, the Method. He's great. He has a fantastic Substack. Look him up. He's got good stuff. And then he said, reincarnation, thanks. And then Randy Neon says, King George, Venetian Party of the North. I've never heard of it. So King George, like as in the one that was that the founding fathers fought against, which I want to say is King George III. He was literally part of something called the Venetian Party. I've never heard that before. Is that correct, Randy? I don't know if you're still here. I would love to hear a follow-up on that. By the way, I'm out of questions now. I need to go. So that's something I can look up. King George III, Venetian Party of the North. I'm going to be able to find citations on that, because that would be another huge smoking gun. Because I try and I always have people lecture me about stuff that I already usually know. Not always, but more information about. And it's in the Committee of 300. Well, Committee of 300 is not a source that I think that it's largely correct, but I was hopeful that there would be some kind of more mainstream source that people would argue about less. Because one of the things I always try and point out to people is most people come down to, they think it's one of four things of who runs the world, and all four of them circle around the actual core, which is the Venetian black nobility, and that is people think it's the Jews, wrong. They think it's the Jesuits, wrong. They think it's the Masons, wrong. Or they think it's the British Crown, and Jesuits and Vatican are kind of interchangeable. All of those are right near the core, because the House of Windsor, actually the House of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, is a way out on the branch of the Venetian black nobility, but they're much weaker than the other families whose names I won't mention. In fact, Diana's butler, Princess Diana, who died, he gave an apocryphal story of how the one thing Diana was never supposed to talk about is how her and the Queen and Charles had to go to Italy, and they had to bow and kiss the ring of a much older Italian family. I'm going to leave it at that. I try not to say their names anymore. I also just don't want to come into conflict, and other people do more research and are willing to name names. And there's a reason I'm not willing to talk about it anymore. The angels told me not to touch on like the specifics of the modern day families. You can look up Philip Jimenez. Is more than willing to talk about. There's a lot of information. There's a guy named oh gosh, he has the same name as the black guy in Pulp Fiction. God, what was the big boss guy in Pulp Fiction? I can't think of what his name is. If someone can tell, Marcellus Wallace. There's a guy named Marcellus Vega who uses a voice disguiser, probably because he's an insider of some sort. And he goes into a lot of depth. If you want to get all the juice on that, you can look up also Female Illuminati has a very interesting theory that the VBN is secretly run by a dark matriarchy. It's something I plan to explore at some point on the channel, that actually the women who run these VBN families are actually at the center of power as opposed to the men, which is very fascinating. And femaleilluminati.com, although there's weird trackers on that site, they name names. And so does Marcellus Vega on YouTube. They're willing to name names. I'm not willing to talk about their names anymore. I did in the video I already have up. It's up, but I'm not going to say the names anymore. So one of those, I think actually even Philip mentions it in one of our VBN series. So yeah, he has cited it from London Museum. I forget which one. Again, that's one of those things where I always I have to, I did the Leo Taxel hoax video a little while ago, and I do need to go in 4 minutes. But he cites a letter between Albert Pike and, or a later guy cites a letter between Albert Pike and Giuseppe Mazzini. I actually think that's true. It has a ring of truth to me, but if indeed that letter exists, it's been removed from the public in the British Museum. So I would just need to see the actual citation and see if I could run it down, whatever, because a lot of people mistake the British Crown, as I said, for who runs the world. And it's an easy mistake to make, just like any of those all seem like viable. But what you have to understand is that the Venetians, which were in the Roman Senate, and then before that they were in Tyre and Carthage, and before that they were in Babylon, and even possibly Acadia and Sumeria, although that then gets a little trickier. For sure they're Babylonian, right? And the Radonites, they all pre-exist all of those groups. Like Saxe-Coburg-Gotha wouldn't come into existence till like 2,000 years later. Abraham wasn't even born when they were doing usury and Babylonian black money magic in Babylon. I mean, this group is much older, much more ancient, and was doing usury long before Judaism even got rolling. They, they certainly predate the Jesuits. All those things are much, much, much later Johnny-come-lately appendages of this sort of octopus. But the trunk of the tree and the roots of the tree are in Babylon. The trunk of the tree are these VBN families. Freya, I believe he's correct about the Venetian party. Hey, Freya, didn't see it the last one. Good to see you. Always love seeing you. Always bring so much to the chat. By the way, folks, Freya is super knowledgeable and brilliant. And thank you for showing up, Freya. Is that interview on video? I'm not sure which interview you're referring to. Sorry, I just can't track when I'm talking. So I'm not sure if you're talking about the Philip one. Yes, that is. It's in the Black Nobility series. Marcellus Wallace. Yes, Marcellus Wallace. But the channel that has the really deep information is Marcellus Vega, Vega, like the star Vega. And whoever it is uses a voice disguiser, so they're more paranoid than me. That's the Irish guy that has a site. That's a good one too. That's like Limerick or something like that. That's actually the best source of information I found. I can't remember what the name of that is. It's like Limerick or what's his name? Yeah, Danny Boy Limerick website. That has the best information. I'll just put this up in the chat. Boy, I don't know what'll happen if I put this up, but I guess we'll find out. This is the single. Oh, it didn't want me to do it. Oh, it went through. This, in my opinion, is the single best website if you want to get current information. This person is really, 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 really going out on a limb. That is called Grim Hustle. He's just I just find him to be a very curious character. he seems like he's on a fairly high level of consciousness given his background, but he's very pragmatic and very hardcore, like you might expect of a former Russian gangster. I just love that channel. It's called Grim Hustle. And they just give a lot of like really, really good advice on there. I don't agree with everything, of course. Nobody totally agrees with me, and I don't totally agree with anybody, nor should we, that's Malachian hive mind nonsense, but Grim Hustle, it's great. So yay, Diana's Butler. Yeah. All right. I need to get going, everyone. Thank you so much. Much love. And I will be having another stream either Thursday evening or Friday. I'm going to have to move Thursday live streams to Wednesdays because angelic magic classes must be on a Thursday because it's Jupiter ruled. And so in order to not have to bump it in the future, I'm just going to move it to Wednesdays on a permanent basis, or perhaps Fridays. Friday might be better in some ways. I have to think, but I won't be doing the Thursday every week. It's going to be either Wednesday or Friday every week going forward. So interesting how all these former gangsters have mobcasts now. Yeah, I didn't know there was other ones, but it is funny. Oh, thank you so much, Randy. All right. See y'all later. Much love. Bye-bye.